I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and this is The Radical Center, a recording project I began in 2022 as a way to describe and discuss the social and ideological currents that are rapidly altering our culture. In a time when political polarization seems to be the norm, I'm seeking to understand rather than react. I'm grateful to all the thoughtful men and women who share their stories and insights with me in this conversation series. If you would like to contribute to this project financially, there are links in the description. Thank you, and thank you all for listening and being part of this exploration. Hi, I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Craig Wiener and Jenny Holland, and you're probably familiar with both Craig and Jenny if you've been watching this channel. Jenny joins us most Mondays for the Solid Ground live stream, and I've had a couple of really lovely opportunities to talk with Dr. Wiener about various issues in our psychological and cultural milieu at the moment. Craig and I were talking about ADHD. You've got some wonderful material from your work and research that I think sheds a really useful light on how we conceptualize ADHD right now. And in the course of that conversation, I was thinking about something that Jenny brought to my attention not that long ago, and that's this phenomenon of pathological demand avoidance, which seems to be kind of a pseudo-diagnostic idea that some children just have so much well, I'll let the influencer that we used as an example for our Solid Ground live stream explain this, because she'll get into it better than I can. She's one of these people who kind of is promoting the idea of PDA and trying to get it acknowledged as an official diagnosis. But first of all, thank you both very much for joining me today. It's really nice to see you both, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Ready to be here. Yeah.
I hope I set it up okay. So
Yeah.
I will share my screen with you both, and so that I can we can get an example of this PDA concept, and we can see what you think about this, Dr. Wiener. So I'm going to share sound, and here's an Instagram screen. So here is one. I'll just pop into one video, and we'll get an overview.
Life 5 years ago with a pathologically demand avoidant child. All of your child's basic needs struggles, toileting, sleep, hygiene, safety, eating, and their challenging behavior, meltdowns, panic attacks, shutdown, selective mutism, controlling you, abusive behavior towards the siblings. All of that is related to their subconscious perception of threat around two things. Do they feel equal to or above those around them? And do they perceive true autonomy and choice in the moment? That's it. That's all you need to know. One insight that would have changed my life 5 years ago with a
So she kind of goes into this here, but you can also see where it's written down in this list. She asks us to think about pathological demand avoidance as a nervous system difference or disability. She uses the word disability quite a lot. And the idea is that you have to accommodate a PDA child by allowing them to feel like they are above everybody else in order to signal safety to them so that they can get out of this burnout mode that they go into. And I'm sure we could pull up more videos. So, but just to start, maybe that's a good place to start.
Okay. So, you have babies who are born with infant negative temperament also, which goes with easily disrupted, and when they're not getting what they want, and when they're uncomfortable, they scream and yell and are very difficult for the parent to deal with, and the parent has to go to great lengths to calm them down and soothe them. And that's so she's talking about these early occurring behaviors But the category seems to, some people talking about it as it's an offshoot or subcategory of autism. There's a character, but you're dealing with all these different problems that are getting lumped together under this name. And this is what we do in the diagnostic system. We have a name as if it's a homogeneous group when the heterogeneity of the group is incredible. Like with the if you take autism, there's autism varies with IQ, the extent of empathy a person could develop with others, interest in affection, reaction to touch, verbal facility, the extent of how much they can develop a theory of mind. So you're talking about apples and oranges. You get this extremely autistic kid doesn't have any response to the other person's perspective or interest in relationships versus somebody. Uh, so the youngster person is talking about, to what extent can the parent get the child to learn to calm down without going to great lengths to calm them down? Now the child's learning to get dependent on the parent's efforts to soothe them. So now you're not what much are you exploring? Could the child learn to self-soothe? That's one problem. How does she decide the child feels below somebody or above somebody? And why is the combination the only intervention? Now there's all these continual problems with each kid. Does the kid learn to self-soothe? Then does the kid learn to change what they do if the parent sets limits over time? Just because the baby starts off almost impossible to deal with, that's for the parents who've dealt with negative infant temperament babies. They say the same thing. You're just going to have to settle them down because they don't. So, but they do get dependent on other people accommodating. We talked about that, and when we talked about the ADHD, one of the vignettes was about this. But I mean, what do people think about even as a starting point?
Mhm.
I had never heard the concept of negative temperament babies, but I definitely had one.
There you go. All right.
I was like, oh, I didn't know. No one ever mentioned that to me 16 years ago when my son was, I think we called it colic, a
Yeah.
lot of screaming,
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of bad sleeping, not a great eater, very, I look back on it now with fondness as well. I mean, it was hard at the time, but he really seemed like he had infantile angst, and he was extremely unsettled. So yeah, I didn't know that was an actual category, but it definitely sounds familiar.
Yeah, and you can see what did you have to do over time to deal with. So there was a propensity to overreact and tantrum when there was discomfort, and then
Yeah,
and it could be beyond discomfort. It can then be when a sibling's born, or when you had to transition them or stop them from doing it. So it's all the same kinds of things evolve for all of us. It's the negative infant temperament just is a starting point that gets this, but you can have the same outcomes without that. If the parent's constantly giving in to hyperbole, then the hyperbole gets enhanced, and that's what gets conditioned. So there's always an interchange between what the child's doing and what the parent's doing to deal with this particular child, and each child presents its own socialization difficulties and advantages.
yeah.
I had two that were really strong that way in temperament, really difficult. We called it colic also. Two of my four, and then two who were easy and happy and just very relaxed temperaments, But two that you had to walk around the block or rock in the living room to a specific song because you'd figure out like that one thing could soothe the baby. And I think, when you see this particular influencer channel is just one of a number of them, and they have a ton of followers, like hundreds of thousands of followers on these channels. It seems to signal that parents are really looking for an answer to explain to them, why is my kid more difficult than other people's kids? And so they're pointing at something. I'm just not convinced at all that the diagnosis here of you must accommodate this seems it seems very backwards to me. And yet that's one of the very first things that these videos will address is like, you probably think this is backwards, but actually with these kids are so different. They're so challenged that they have a disability, and the only way to raise them is through throwing out everything that you know about conventional parenting. And so I kind of wonder a couple of things, like, are kids getting more difficult? Or are we seeing something that is making kids more difficult? Have we completely like polluted our environment to the point where kids are coming into life with with temperamental challenges at a rate that's higher than it maybe used to be? Is it just a feature of our social lack of social resources? There aren't as many people around to help young parents, or is it social conditioning that tells us that we should think differently or expect different things out of our kids? I mean, what could be going on here? And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this.
So my view is to take each individual case and do an analysis of the whole history of what's gone on since birth, and how have people reacted. You can get a baby. It was, yeah, you had two babies, four babies, so two were very difficult. So you had to, with an infant, we always have to do what I used to call the protector view, which is you just have to accommodate because the baby has no resources to do anything, and you had to do something to calm those infants down. Okay, and then but over time you probably had to learn to get the kid to make some adjustments to what you wanted. Now, if you didn't do that and you continued to see the kid as they are unable to self-accommodate or accommodate to anything, or they don't care about your feelings, once you make that assumption, then you're always going into a compensatory solution, which has gone on. As soon as we make a diagnosis and we medicalize it, then we immediately go into a they can't do it, they're unable, and we start doing parenting that's very different. Because if you can presume some degree of competence that the kid could learn and develop, you do other things than if you presume they can't possibly succeed. So one of the dangers of all these categories is that they shift parents into the view that there's something inherently limiting the kid's possibilities of adjusting to the world. And then we take parenting in that direction. And that's the concern I think we're raising today is this advice, which is that's what they do with the ADHD crowd. They say, well, they can't really learn to self-manage because they're defective neuro delayed kids, and therefore you always have to be overseeing them and managing for them and doing contingency management to make things explicit to them. So you're never even they don't even have the opportunity to learn to self-manage or do things with more autonomy, because you're presuming it's impossible for them to do that. So that's what I think the danger is in today's world of diagnostics and medicalization of psychology.
Yeah, can I just say something really quick? There's two things that you said there, Craig, that were really like important for me to hear. One is with infants you accommodate, and I think that's really important to say that. And because infants, as you say, don't have resources or powerless, helpless, they're little bundles of nerve endings and senses that are still in many ways attached to the mother or to the caregiver. And I think you should go to great lengths to accommodate an infant. But I also love that you say that when you diagnose and medicalize children going through the stages of development, you rob them of something really important, which is ways of letting them find ways to cope or develop other senses or other abilities to counteract whatever disability, using that word with great kind of reluctance, they might have. And I think both of those are really important. I mean, children, I remember what it's like to be a child, and I remember the things I was very bad at. And of course, this was in the 1980s, so people were very blunt back then. So they were just like, "You're bad at that," or "You're lazy," or "You're whatever." And that's not. I'm not saying we should necessarily do that, but what I was able to do, I mean, and it caused me a lot of suffering, but I developed other things that I was good at. And I became very focused on developing the things that I was good at and as to sort of balance it out. And if I had someone micromanaging it all the time, I already felt bad and helpless, but having an adult kind of run interference for me all of the time would have actually taken away the resilience that I did develop. So I think both of those elements are key. And I think, especially when we're talking about this particular Instagrammer who's, basically waiting hand and foot on her children who are like fourth and fifth grade. And I think, I don't know if we mentioned this in the live stream that we did on this, Leslie, but infants to me are a whole different kettle of fish. And I think I don't have a theory of how to deal with infants. And I only had one, but I grew up around a lot of cousins and big family. I think whatever helps the mother-child dynamic and makes it the most easy. So if co-sleeping is it, then co-sleeping. If it's bottle feeding, then it's bottle feeding. If it's attachment parenting, then it's attachment parenting. And infants are actually very different. So whatever gets you through the night on that front. And I'm not gonna develop a theory of the case for that. But with children, you have to expect you have to kind of guide their advancement because their abilities grow as they grow.
Yeah. That might be what's getting lost to some extent. Some parents, they get to the point where they just see the kid is unable to calm themselves or adjust to what's expected of them, and so they learn to stop doing that, and they learn to do whatever they can to placate, to calm down the urgency or crisis that they're encountering. But we used to talk about enabling people in the alcohol literature, and or we're mixing so many people up into the same bundle, which is when people are going for the Olympics, do they have demand avoidance behavior because they're negligent of other people's how they're imposing on other people's lives because they're obsessing about what they want to accomplish, or a person's writing books or articles or trying to prepare for anything. Anybody who does anything outstanding is going to have some degree of avoidance, responsibility avoidance behaviors because they're focused on their own agenda and want their way and want their time. Used to be remember the whole absent-minded professor type of thing where the person's just embedded in their own thing. The other thing too is if you think of the categories of systematizers and empathizers, which is in the literature, autistic literature. So males are more likely to be systematizers and women have more likely to be empathizers. But there's a very different way of living in the world depending on where you are on the curve. Because if you're a systematizer, you like math and you like things to be orderly and you like rules. And these are boys that might like certain games because they learn the rules and they keep the rules, but they don't really have relationships as much as they play Dungeons and Dragons and other things, because as long as they know the rule system, they can operate within the predictability. This is the whole anxiety thing where if they get predictability, they have less anxiety. Now, the world of relationships is more unpredictable, and there's more requirement to adapt to each other and adjust. So you're dealing with how our kids orient in terms of these categories. How important is relationships? Because if you're going to do systematizer, then you don't really care as much about what happens to another person's feelings. You're just dealing with keeping the rule structure going. So these kids how do these kids that they talk about fit on that dimension? And autistic kids vary on all these ways. They just tend to be more systematizers because they can control they want more control because it's less anxiety provoking to have control. But what about ADHD kids? They're the same category. They don't like it when other people are on the phone and they don't have control of the mother's attention, or they don't like to sit in whole groups or school because they don't have control over the agenda of that. They like it when they get somebody sitting next to them and they can attend more to what they want. So it's almost like we're all in the same boat. We put these categories, but they're imposed categories on a very complex world, and we're acting like we're like identifying some discrete uh, problem, and it's just blending together in terms of all these dimensions. So I would just say you just take each kid and you find out what's going on. What did the parents do at the beginning? How did they deal with the behaviors? How do they unwittingly reinforce the very thing they want to get rid of? And how are they continuing it? And what are they doing that really helped be different? And in what situations does the kid even respond differently? So let's say this kid needs the other person to help them get what they want. And now, are they more likely to pay attention to the other person's perspective then? Because in the same category, I was reading about this PDA thing. They talk about these kids can be manipulative, but they're talking about as being autistic. So how do you talk about them in the same way? How can you be autistic and be manipulative? You have to know something about the other person to be even doing it. So
There are a number of inherent contradictions in this theory, and you're pointing to one of them, but one of them, and I'm kind of piggybacking off of what Jenny was saying, but the one of the things that you hear over and over in this sort of PDA model is that the kids need autonomy. But the way that it is presented is like, oh, isn't that cute? They need autonomy. So you have to do everything to keep them from being autonomous so that you're always curating the world around them. So you've become this really manipulative force in order to give the child who wants autonomy the illusion of autonomy. And because you're doing so many accommodations to them, you're virtually preventing them from learning through trial and error about the world around them and about their social landscape, so that you're navigating everything for them, and you're kind of, it's a concept of the snowplow, or you're getting everything out of their way. And I guess I feel like there's something a little bit heartbreaking in that the very thing that you're acknowledging that your child seems to want, you're setting up so that they shall never have.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Yeah, you're not going to self-manage if you're doing all the management. You're orchestrating a pretend world, which is what contingency management does. You're orchestrating a pretend world. That's why they don't get any generalization from put somebody in an institution. They come out. What do they learn about the world other than they learn institutional behavior?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just seems so striking to me, Craig. Maybe you can talk about this from a practice point of view, but it just seems so striking to me that the behaviors that this woman is highlighting are so beyond the pale. They're violent, they're abusive behaviors that she is accommodating, including when they're directed at her other child, and herself and her husband.
And the nanny. There was the story about the
Oh,
child
yes, the
throwing
nanny.
something and
Yeah.
knocking the nanny,
Yeah.
everything out of the nanny's hands, but then she just
Yeah.
went over and soothed the
Soothe the
child.
child. He was
Yeah.
8 years old or 9 years old. I mean,
Mhm.
almost grown. I mean, getting bigger physically. And I found it so shocking. Like my jaw hits the floor every time I see one of these posts that she puts up, because the implications of that to me are genuinely alarming. That there is a whole demographic of parents out there who are raising children by essentially encouraging and enabling and abetting violent, abusive behavior. What is that going to play out? How is that going to play out when these people are adults?
They go to college campuses and destroy the campus because they're not getting what they want. All right.
Mm.
Yeah,
One of
yeah,
the best pieces of advice that I got as a parent, there were several really important pieces of advice in my life, but one of them was that you're not parenting your child for the age they are now. You're parenting with a view towards their ultimate growth. You're parenting towards their adulthood. And so all of the things that you're providing to them are with the idea of scaffolding them to independence. And I wonder, there seems to be just very short-term thinking when you're doing these kinds of accommodations with a child this age. When are they going to do the growth
Yeah.
if they're not doing it now?
Exactly. One of my lines was with the if you keep doing this with your son, your future daughter-in-law is not going to like you very much.
Yeah.
I bet that hit home.
Yeah, it really helps because they can see what kind of a person do you want to raise. You know, if you're doing this, who's going to do that for the kid? This is the whole problem. What other woman's going to do this for this boy?
Well, I think that's an interesting angle because then you ask that question and it kind of leads to a whole kind of rat's nest of, what kind of woman, what are the motivations here? What are the real motivations here? And I don't mean to be like Freudian, or I'm not actually, I don't even know if I'm using the term correctly, but, um, you know, if as a mother, your entire job is to, kiss the ass of this child who is being incredibly um, difficult and violent and all these things, what is your actual motivation? Like, you present to the world in this sort of almost like a bureaucratic schema, PowerPoints and toolkits and all these really bizarre things that have nothing to do with being a mother. You're bringing that in to kind of systematize what looks to me like a devouring mother, or like you said last week, Leslie, Munchausen by proxy, um, one of these dark mother traits that is, um, secretly handicapping and cutting off at the knees a child because of some sort of dependency, like a far more toxic bond, but you're
Mhm.
presenting it to the world as a public service. I
Sort
I,
of,
I find it really a lot. Like I find it like dark, very dark.
it's like the cultivation of a perpetual infant state so that the mother can be, so that there's an ultimate dependency upon that relationship.
Is exactly, yeah. That's right. That's the promote the protector taken to the extreme, which is what we're doing. We become a nation of protectors, and I think it comes with the extent of affluence and the emphasis on safety in the and that's come from all the science we've developed has been identifying safety issues, harm. And then everybody going to college and learning about all these harm. So we all become experts of safety. And then the promotion of lack of fathers in households and the promotion of females in all these institutions, which would tend to favor safety over risk.
Mhm.
It just has to do it with a gender proclivity at this point. So there's all these different reasons. The internet. So if you hear a harm, it becomes global, and so everybody's aware of things in different ways. And Dr. Spock and all the kind, gentle parenting and don't harm your child. So we have fewer children, so it's easier to accommodate to each and protect them. If you have 15 kids, you can't really pay attention to every little detail of their lives. So we can't even helicopter them in the same ways we would if we had fewer kids. So again, every diagnosis seems to just bring this kind of even the word pathology is in the term, so it automatically requires the parent to make the adjustments. I think that the characterization of the problem automatically says that we've got to do some special extra thing, that we have to abandon our expectations and standards to adjust to this special case. And I think that's the premise of most of these new things that come out. Every time they discover a new thing, it becomes another accommodation that we have to make away from traditional ways of parenting and what's worked over many years from many different people. And now we all come to some unique soul way of doing it. And so if it's a problem, now you made a like an epidemic problem because you get rid of all the individuality of parents used to be. So it's the same thing with universal childcare. What if we're recommending is wrong? Now every kid's affected. So now they've got every kid piled into this category now, and if we go to whatever treatment gets hold on the internet, now you got thousands and millions of kids with the same mistake because they're all treating the same way. I think there might be kids that don't respond to what the parent wants, or even or even a cognizant of what other people want. But
Mhm.
you gotta lump them together with people kids who could do very different things because they gave them the same name. That's the danger.
Mhm. I think that what you said about adjusting our expectations and standards to accommodate some special case, that really stands out to me as something that we're seeing over and over right now, over and over. This exact concept. Like we can throw out the values or the systems that have been important to us because this is an exception. It's like think about COVID was just one on a big scale. The way that we acted in response to that was well, let's set aside all of our norms and our standards and our expectations because here's a special case. And so I feel like that same pattern ripples through society at different levels. And I love that you come back to the individuality and the sort of, I guess, the psychological construct of these diagnoses. A lot of psychological diagnoses are like, I mean, it's just very strange. Here's a list of things. If you have five of them, then you have this thing. But they're rather different, and that doesn't really give you an idea of how, a person with this particular constellation compares to a person with this constellation over here, and yet we're going to call them all the same thing, and then we have a drug for that, or we have a way to treat this as a special case. And I find that really quite alarming.
Yes, yeah. Even with think of the depressive category. You can eat too much, sleep too little, eat too little, do this, that. Is 72 permutations. And ADHD, you can be doing all these avoidant behaviors. You can not raise your hand. You could be the constellation is so you can blurt out and not blurt out. And then instead of looking at, well, how would we account for the blurting out or the not raising the hand or doing this particular thing and not this particular thing? Yeah, we've lost interest in making sense of what are the individual differences and what would that mean differently about the problem we're even dealing with. It could be very different problems we're dealing with depending on what the problematic behavior is. So
Mhm.
I think it's been a problem with the diagnostic categories, even though they make it easier for us in some ways, but I don't know how it's affected our treatment.
Leslie, I think you're absolutely right to bring up the medication aspect. I mean, I think parents, I think especially in the States, parents are detached from larger child rearing communities, and women and moms and dads didn't grow up as much around what I like. I'm always talking about the ethnic grandma, and don't have the memories, especially our age. Well, not our age, but millennials will have less of that than we had because we were still being partially raised by our grandmothers who were from the greatest generation or the silent generation or whatever. Um, and so millennials didn't have that sense of like, oh, this is sort of familiar because I grew up in a multi-generational family. So I remember what it was like when my siblings or cousins were born. I remember my grandmother and all that. We didn't. So they were cut off from that. And you drop a bad temperament infant or whatever they call them in there. And I remember what that was like. And but I had a large extended family of women that would come to me and help me and talk me through it and I just endure it. But if you then go to your pediatrician or you then go to someone and they're like, oh, well, actually, how have you thought about amphetamines? I mean, obviously not for infants, but like I can understand how when you have not been rooted in a child rearing world and you are desperate, and you go to an expert and they present you with a drug. I can see why you would take that. I still find it hard not to judge when I think of like a little 5-year-old boy getting put on Ritalin. I just find that like I get upset. But and then the school forcing it, so parents are in a very very hard place and try not to be too judgmental. But the medication part of this is so key because it's taken over. At least from the outside, it looks like it's taken over the system, and it has done for how many years do you think, Craig?
Yeah, well, when I started, it was I think it was like 5 drugs on the market, and you would only give drugs if therapy wasn't getting any results after 10 sessions or something. They used to have different recommendations. Then it became a, a much more, as soon as you get the label, you get the pharmaceutical. But I thought your idea about the extended families and how traditions and help in the family group could influence people, and now we're influenced by more centralized arguments. And I think that's gotten rid of the individuality. I think that's an important idea that we've gone to the internet or to experts, and experts have centralized recommendations and homogenized uh, parenting, and maybe that's the whole trend. That and even
Yeah, they've also dehumanized it. I mean, because if you haven't been around, like I said, little new babies and toddlers and old people and young adults, and everyone's kind of in the same, at least once a week in the same house together, and like there's all different levels of chaos happening because you've got all different age groups. A child will seem very foreign to you. Like if you're an adult that has not grown up around children, a child will seem very, very foreign and quite frightening, actually. Like I used
yeah,
to babysit a lot when I was a kid, and every time you would be put in charge of a total stranger who was a 2 year old, it was really like, oh God, And then I just had a little bit of practice, and then I got more practice, and it became less frightening. Um, but children are challenging, and if you have never, if you don't have a natural, if you don't already have an experience of being around them, they really seem like really foreign entities that are really really terrifying.
so that's another right. So then we become unfamiliar with it, and therefore you're more scared, and then you're more likely to do anything you can to settle it down because you're scared. So what we do is we take instant results, which is the drug or placate. And those will give you the instant results, or control. You can oppress, placate or oppress, or drug, but those will give you more instant. But it might not give you the long-term person you're looking for, like is what we're saying.
Mhm. So you've been working with kids and families for 46 years, I think you said, Craig.
Yeah.
And what are the trends that you see in this? Do you see this becoming more and more prevalent? How has parenting changed over that time? Do you see any reason for optimism about where things are going, or does it all seem like it's kind of unraveling?
Well, I think there's a subgroup of parents that still are saying things what we're saying,
Mhm.
and they're really excited about learning to say things differently and to identify the patterns, and it's great. But a lot of times we're battling, I think all of us probably experiences, we're battling, my pediatrician said this, or I know it's going to be difficult once a neuropsychologist does a test. Then it's almost unravels therapy because now you're going back to this kind of inherent limitation that's inside the kid that is, and then we're back to medicalizations, and then that takes the kid away from uh, looking at a return to psychology, which is uh, first book I wrote was called Return to Psychology, and so there's a combination thing, but we are battling. Then watching people who have been on all these drugs for years and the amount of emotional instability they have and I wonder to what extent the drugs contributed to the emotional instability because they're on multiple drugs, and maybe I just see the ones that are having trouble, but these are people that never got help. They just were told they had this biochemical problem and they were going to do it. And in the short term, again, in the short term, it calmed down their emotions. They were rescued by it. They thought it was great. But talk to them years later, what was really solved? Maybe there's some subgroup that was helped, but uh, the other thing too is the degree of insight therapists have. Who goes into the field? What's their views? How are they classically trained to look at behavior in the way that psychologists used to look at behavior? What are they being taught in schools? Are they being indoctrinated into medicalization so that you tell people go to therapy? Boy, what's the therapy now? Now you experienced this at school, where what kind of therapy was being promoted? So the idea of going to therapy versus doing drugs, well, I don't know what they're doing in therapy. They're doing what this woman says to do on the.
Well, and another thing, therapists, and I see this in my coaching practice because I work with families and teens in parent coaching and working with young people. And a lot of times the kids that I work with come in already on antidepressants and Adderall or one of these sort of ADHD drugs, and both at the same time often, and if not both, then one or the other. And I've talked with therapists who also see a lot of clients who are on a lot of these drugs. They're not on them in any coordination with the therapist or with the helping professional that they're working through their problems with, whether it's a psychologist, a therapist, a coach. They're getting the drugs prescribed through their medical provider. And so there's this kind of wall that's up where the therapist doesn't want to overstep and ask too much or push it at why are you on that and would you consider getting off of that, because they don't feel like it's their place. In fact, they feel like they're maybe stepping outside of their realm if they start to do that. And yet the medical provider, I can't imagine they're spending very much time with these clients before they prescribe these things. I mean, the average doctor's visit, and I worked in primary care for a long time, so I know it's very, very brief. So you're coming in and you're basically filling out a checklist form. They see, oh, okay, here's your script. So nobody's helping the individuals who are on these. I know that there exist psychiatrists and psychiatric nurse practitioners that actually do a workup with people, but I think most people are getting them through their GP or their primary care physician. So where's the oversight and where is the limitation on these medications? Who's telling people maybe this is good for short term for you, but we should have a plan for getting you back off of this? And so people are just on them perennially.
That's right, and exactly. If you look at the medical school curriculum, they learn coordinating the checklist with the drug, but they're not really. It takes years and years to become a reasonable therapist or psychologist or anything else. It's years and years and years to know enough about what goes on in the world or what categories to even pay attention to. So it's not. The other thing too is that the insurance companies would say, well, are you coordinating with the primary care physician? Well, like you said, Leslie, sometimes you're operating from very different perspectives that don't coincide. There's a presumption of disability versus a presumption of learning. How do you coordinate? And then I don't understand the coordination. That's one can sometimes be a problem for the other, because if you sedate the person or get them on a drug that gets them to not play but to focus, you're not even getting the old behaviors to return, which would help you. How do you get them to learn something new, and they're not even exhibiting the behavior anymore because they're not playing anymore. So you don't. One may impede the other even rather than even help. It prevents you from. And people change when there's urgency. So you take away the urgency by giving a drug, and now you don't have any therapy, because now why go to therapy? I'm not in an urgency.
Can I ask you a question? When you were just talking about play there, how traditionally or before the over medicalization, what does your therapy look like? Like, what does a good session look like in your experience?
All right. So I get the person to talk with me about. We usually meet with the parent at first, and I listen to the parent, and I pay attention to what the parent is describing as the problem and under what conditions, and how is the parent handling those particular behaviors that they're talking about with their kid. And I can get a sense pretty quickly about what is getting reinforced. And I also find out about the parent and their psychology, which is helping me understand how how to account for some of their interventions or what they might be afraid of and what they're compensating for in terms of their own histories. Usually, for all of us, if we've experienced problems in our childhood, we don't want to induce those same problems with our kids. But we go such extreme to not have that happen, we create another set of problems. So you've got to blend the psychology of the family and which includes the other kids. What's going on with the older sibling who's now the younger one's doing the opposite, and so you're looking at a matrix of issue of behaviors and how they interact, and then what happens when the parents try to initiate some of the things I'm suggesting. How do they do it? How can they fine tune it? Because sometimes they think they're doing what we talk about, but their tone of voice is different, or the words they select are still coercive, or presuming one thing and not another. So that it takes a long time for a parent even to learn to parent differently, or for the child to over time learn new behaviors, new possibilities. And what's the child getting out of what they're doing? What's the reinforcement of that would account for the child to repeat these behaviors? And what reinforces the parent to continue to do what they're doing? And what are the side effects? If you do that, what is the child also learning? So the parent doesn't always consider that they're role modeling the behavior the kid's going to then copy and go back to them. So there's no way a pediatrician's office is going to do this, and there's no way a drug's going to solve anything but sedate or stimulate something, and it's not going to address all these subtle things that go with how we learn to live in the world.
I wonder what your thoughts are on this. Jenny sent me a video that was a doctor talking about MTHFR variation. That's a gene, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, I believe is the full name. And there's been a lot of research on how genetic variation can impact nutrient absorption, which can have a pretty dramatic impact on behavior and mood and things. And over a lifetime, there's a significant correlation with MTHFR variation and things like bipolar and schizophrenia and depression. And I worked in a naturopathic clinic for about 6 years, and I saw this in my oldest daughter had what we would have called ADHD. I never was into diagnosis, so I was pressured by the school to get her diagnosed, and I just thought we'll work with this differently. But when she was about 12 or 13, maybe 14, she had a lot of allergies too. So I had taken her to a naturopathic doctor rather than her usual primary care doctor. And they checked her for a lot of different nutrients and started a supplementation regime. And it changed her life dramatically at that point. Like, she was able to focus. She went from really struggling in school to doing very, very well. She lost a lot of weight, which she just seemed like kind of a normal chubby kid, but she just slimmed down and felt much more energetic and better in her body. So there were these nutrient issues that were being addressed, and it wasn't drugs at all. It was just supporting her health and also avoiding certain allergens that she was tested for. I later went on to be tested for the MTHFR variation and found that I have I have the variation. It's complicated. It's like 2 gene sequences that you can. Anyway, I won't get us down in the weeds too far on that. But so if the parent has significant variations, very likely they pass that on to their child because that's what they had available to pass on. I saw in my daughter some of the ways that nutrient absorption made a big difference in her behavior and mood. And then, interestingly enough, my younger son, we realized that he's really sensitive to food dyes. And so he'll act like a little psycho just when he's had red 40, he'll act like it really changes his mood and his behavior. So we learned early on, we just avoid some of those synthetics that they seem to have a higher impact on his body. But that goes along with that genetic variation as well, because if people can't use certain nutrients, they can't they also don't have the ability to excrete certain metals and toxins as well as people with a fully normal genetic sequence. And I wonder how much this might have to do with the rise in some of the behavioral issues, because one of the things that's impacted this or impact individuals with an MTHFR variation is synthetic B vitamins, like what you find in all of our enriched wheat and grain products. They're all enriched with things like folic acid. Someone with MTHFR cannot use that. They can only use the natural form folate. So the synthetic not only doesn't work for their body, but it actually can block up the pathways for absorption of the actual nutrient that the person needs, which again, over time leads to a body burden that's really high and some of these psychiatric conditions. So I think that the research on this is really fascinating. And I wonder, Jenny, have you done more looking into that? And Dr. Wiener, are you familiar with that at all? And what are your thoughts?
I think that it's important, like even with PMS or pain syndromes, that or if you ingest alcohol and it changes the way you behave. So all these things can have an effect on our behaviors, and if it can be solved by not drinking or by doing some uh, therapeutic, which with vitamins that's great. And it's more difficult to be reasonable when you're uncomfortable or when you're irritable or anything else. So that's great. So you can always, I think it's always important to assess that. And then the problem is you're still going to be left with some behavior. If it solves the whole problem completely, great. And if there's still leftover thing, then how do you manage it? And how do you manage it in a way that is careful not to either reinforce it or perpetuate it, or and how can you manage it so that it's well, husbands and wives have to learn to adjust to each other so that they can maintain some sense of affinity, and so you're learning to flow with your world. So, but if you can solve the problem through adjusting biology, then great. But these drugs, it's not quite, it's kind of questionable. They used to make the claim that antidepressants were correcting the chemical imbalance, but there was no such thing. So they were inventing what you found to be an actual medical problem.
Yeah, the chemical imbalance theory in depression sounds very much like the nervous system disability in PDA, which has no, I have never seen them say, here's this test in order to
Yeah.
biometrically assess this. It's just parent self-report.
Yeah, but even like we talked about with the ADHD stuff, even if they found a neurological difference, is that the cause or consequence of living in the world? Because if I tantrum constantly, my body's going to be different than if I don't tantrum. And if I hold in all my anger, how am I affecting my body over the years? Because look, think about what that does to your body when you have fibromyalgia and having this internal tension. So it's always a cause and consequence problem too. Even if you find it, you're not really identifying the cause. You don't know if it's a cause or consequence. This is one of the problems with the co-occurring medical condition when you look at it. In the case of the genetics, though, that's usually a precursor because it was there at the beginning, before everything. So you had that as a primary, in your case, with the uncovering the genetic uh, pattern.
That's fascinating. When you say that tantrums, if you tantrum all the time, that affects your body, what can you talk more about that?
Well, probably different for different people depending on what kind of tantrums they show. But what's the high blood pressure when people get angry quickly, and what's the frequency rate, inflammation rates of people who screaming and yelling, and the world's coming to an end in terms of cortisone emission. What goes on? You have to look at doing studies of. You take a bunch of people who are hysterics, and you say, well, are there any body correlates that go with that way of living in the world? I was talking, if you play a musical instrument, your brain is different, and if you drive a cab, your brain becomes different. So if you tantrum all the time, you're going to be different. Your brain and body, you become a function of what you do over time. It's not it doesn't cause what you do. In the case of
Yeah.
the genetics, you can make the case that there's no environmental variation behaviorally that you could do, but you did a medical intervention that solved that problem, which is fine. No one's discounting but to turn everything into the same thing is what we're talking about. We're turning everything into the same thing, which is, well, it's all a genetic thing,
Mhm.
or it's all before everything, and it's unsolvable in terms of anything.
Right.
Then those cases, those cases become the explanation for all of it, which I think we're rejecting that.
Yeah, to me, it is a cultural issue. Actually, I think on a macro level, anyway, it's a cultural issue in that we don't have sane communities that support domestic life, and we kind of denigrate domestic life. Or I think in pop culture or in popular culture, we either denigrate domestic life or we create these like actually very silly fantasies of like a perfect childhood where, your middle school dance is the most important day of your life, and either it could be nothing can go wrong, and there's like movie after movie and TV show after TV show reinforce this hothouse environment where a child the expectations are way out of proportion, and the parents are like doing moving heaven and earth to make sure that very silly expectation is met to the letter, and nothing can go wrong. And it's like it always seemed, even when I was younger, it always seemed like a crazy way to even be entertained. Like I was like, I don't actually find this particularly entertaining. I find it stressful to watch. It's not fun at all. Um, so I tend towards to look to the cultural um, causes more than other ones. But I agree with both of you that it's all one. But in terms of like looking forward, something I think about when I think about the worst of modern parenting, I worry, and I think it's already happening to a degree where we have these very bad stats about happiness and mental health in young people, young adults. But I worry I actually get worse than that, and sort of there might be a sort of competency crisis coming down the line because we've created two generations of adults that have no resilience, no inner resources, haven't actually been educated in any kind of way that would be familiar with anyone who understood how the world worked in real life. And we've just shoved them out into the world and been like, good luck, kids. I mean, I'm surprised that we don't have planes falling out of the sky at this
Yeah.
point.
No, it's exactly what they're finding is you hire the even in the medical students are not the same as the old medical students. They're not as eager to do things, and they don't follow through the way they used to. And then people who hire, sometimes people don't want to hire even Ivy League people because they become impossible. They get disruptive when they join the organization because they're not really trained to adapt in the same way that people would. You can see this with the artisans in carpentry and all that kinds of things, and building and designing. What's uh, the competency or the how intricate that they can do things. So I agree. It's going to be a real problem for who's going to take care of them.
Yeah.
Really. After they say for every five skilled workmen that retire, there's only two to replace them, and then we don't even know the skill level of the replacements. So
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah,
I I just thought of it. So I live in Ireland, and there's a lot of it's a very rural place. There's low density population. We have cities, obviously, but um, my husband's family is from a rural place, and the cultural difference is big, and mostly in very good ways. Their whole perspective on things is different, and it's much more practical and sane in a lot of ways. And a few years ago, this incredible video did the rounds of a boy who probably was about 4. And he was from the same area that my husband's family are. And I won't do the accent, it's too cute, but I couldn't do it. But he's this little boy, you know how little children, mimic their parents. And when I was a little girl, I would run around pretending I was taking care of babies. And, you busy yourself by you're living in your pretend world. And this little boy is being asked by his mother what he has to do today. And he's eating his cereal and he rattles off for about 10 minutes all of these chores he has to do. He has to fix the fence, and he has to get clean the lorry. And then he has to go see your man down the road about the shed. And he's listing these like task after task after task. And they're all like manual labor. They all involve fixing something or selling something, or, they're all sort of like mechanical and farm and land based. And it's the cutest thing I've ever seen. I actually, you know what, I'll see if I can find the link, and maybe you can even add it in like a split second of it. Because to me, and his mom sort of chuckling at him and encouraging him, and being quite sweet because it's adorable. But he's so serious about it. He's like, oh, and she goes, oh, you're a busy man. You're a busy man. He goes, aye, I'm a busy man. I'm a busy man. And it was just like so lovely. And thinking, well, this little kid is getting to have his little pretend world, but you can see his brain really firing. You can really see his brain firing. And you think, this is so much more appropriate. And also, this child will probably be fine because he's actually probably learning some of these skills. Thank God.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, it was like a white pill. It was like, oh, maybe we'll all be okay.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Actually, Jenny, I found the video. Do you want to see
Oh,
it?
you did?
Do you want to
Yes,
see it,
please.
Dr. Craig? Do you have time?
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
Let's do it because that'll be fun. All right. You guys see this?
There he is.
All right.
Yep.
As well up at my house I'm building.
All right.
It's going on good. They're putting on the windows today.
Oh.
They'll put in the sides, but I need the concrete man this evening. He's coming this evening at 6:30. It's square there for the concrete too, not for Rowan McCaskey.
Rowan McCaskey?
Yeah,
Who's he now?
he drives the lorries.
Right.
And what else do I have to do? I need to go and get the keys on my car because I don't have them yet, because I bought my car yesterday and got my license yesterday. Please don't be out today. I'll park it up at Tessie's, I'll bring my bike up. I just what else I'm doing.
Right.
Putting up barbed wire as well there. I'm trimming hedges.
Oh.
And I'm painting fences. Cutting my sheep. I'm going up to Dublin to look at the digger and see if I can buy it. £50 or so would do him. After Stim Grandma's name. After cut down a big tree. I'm going.
I'll stop it there. But I'll put the link in the description so people can watch the whole thing. That's just adorable.
That's also like literally my husband's family. He may be one of their neighbors. Like that's the world, and it's so lovely. I'm so glad it's there.
That's so sweet. So he's got big plans. He's got motivation.
Yeah. But also he's seeing an adult world that's sort of functioning, right? And he's seeing, okay, my dad has all these responsibilities and I want those responsibilities. I mean, and that is kind of the world I grew up in. Like my cousin and I, we had this game where we played waitress. So every family gathering, we were waitresses because all of our older, our aunts and uncles who were sort of in their late teens, early 20s were all waiters and bartenders. And so they'd kind of come downstairs, they'd probably like half hungover and sit there, and we would bother them by like coming up with our little, what are you getting? And try and take their order and be like, we don't have that. You know what I mean? And it was always this interaction. But it was because I think children actually crave responsibility and crave knowing how to do something. And when they know that, and if they don't know, they pretend. But then, it's like their play is always based around action and agency. And like your job is to guide them into actually having the ability to do the action, because that's what children crave. And that kid is such a great example of it. He's going to cut down the tree. He's going to buy a car,
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I've thought is that as we've reduced family size, and we've also got this pattern of living far from our family of origin, we're becoming more and more isolated, and the kids are becoming more isolated, and they're only in, I mean, with if your kid's in school, they're going to be segregated by age. So we've lost a lot of the connection that our children would have to kids that are a little bit older and a little bit younger, like with more siblings and with cousins and extended families around them. They're losing that ability to look a little bit ahead of themselves and a little bit behind themselves. So they've got somebody to mentor and somebody to look up to. And so if you're just a little kid and the only people around you are your age or all the way to adulthood, well, that's kind of terrifying. That's a huge step, and it doesn't look like that much fun. You're not looking at somebody who's just a little bit more competent and independent than you. You're looking at people who have, all the stresses of adulthood. And so I feel like maybe there's something that's been lost culturally there as well.
Yep.
Yeah. This is so fascinating, and I really appreciate both of you taking the time to dive into this a little bit. I think we could do a many-part series and still not cover the whole field of this very well, but this is a great start. And Craig, I really appreciate the theme of returning to the individual in all of these cases. And when you talk about how we are trying to lump too much into certain labels, that feels like another giant theme of our overly centralized world right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any final thoughts from either of you before we wrap up?
Maybe you don't have time necessarily, but is it possible, Craig, to give just a brief overview of your ADHD presentation or take, or
maybe a teaser for the long one?
A teaser, yeah, that's perfect. Like a few minute summary.
The title of my book was ADHD as a learned behavioral pattern. So it doesn't mean it's caused by environment. It just means that the behaviors are reinforced. And I look at the situations and circumstances where the particular behaviors we call ADHD get reinforced, or so that the idea is that there are a group of behaviors that have to do with intrusiveness or overstepping limits or avoiding expectations and limits, so that they're non-preferred behaviors that occur when the child's encountering adversities, things that are associated with failure or any kind of discomforts. And these are the behaviors the kid has evolved over time to deal with adversity and discomforts, failure. So there's a whole way to understand this and how to blend in all this medicalization. So I try to take apart the medical model, which I think goes with each diagnosis, the medical model that you can see even with this PDA. And I help parents, instead of presuming lack of competence that ADHD prevents the child, which is what we're dealing with today, I help parents, help the kid learn to self-rely and self-manage rather than assume they can't, and help them learn to cooperate rather than operate in terms of their own preferences rather than integrate with others. So you got a lot of the same themes. I think that's why Leslie thought of this, because we were talking about the ADHD and how it really the same kinds of issues. They were really for all of us. It's really a matter of how extreme you do these things. We are more likely to do things if we have a vote and we are comfortable doing them, and we're less likely to do them if we're uncomfortable. So, and we're more likely to want our way if people reinforce us that we can get our way, and we're less likely to do it if we don't, and we're more likely to consider what other people want, if I can get what I want more if I please you versus if I don't please you. So these are very resourceful sets of behaviors that we call ADHD, as if it represents some comprehensive neurodevelopmental delay. Like, what is that saying? And there's no neurodevelopmental delay that anybody's identified that can predict the diagnosis category. So it's just I guess that's the rough outline? I don't know.
Well, that's a great teaser. I want to know more.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
in a way, when you're describing that, I'm thinking maybe this is actually like an intelligent adaptation to a system that's become overly bureaucratic and more meaningless. Like maybe I shouldn't care about this. So anyway, that yeah,
But
it
yeah, that fits with the uprise of this behavior. Sure, that goes
yeah,
with it.
it
Yeah.
might. It
Why
might.
learn tradition when it's a lousy tradition? That's what we're saying now. It's who cares about it?
Well, having
Yeah,
heard most of the presentation, I think it's excellent. I look forward to we'll meet soon to re-record that discussion so that we can give it more time because the first time was a bit rushed. So I think
yeah.
it's worth listening to. So I'll definitely look forward to that.
Sounds great. Look forward to it.
Thank you
Yeah.
both for a really good conversation today.
All right.
And
Thank you. Thank you, Craig.
I'll
Yeah.
put links
Thank
in the
you.
description.
Enjoyed talking with both of you. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much.